If you don't hear now, it may be too late. Urgent message from God. Don't ignore. What if I told you that the silence you feel right now could actually be God calling you? Yes, that emptiness, that inexplicable discomfort. Maybe it's not abandonment. Maybe it's a calling. And ignoring it could cost you dearly, not tomorrow, but today, because spiritual time doesn't wait. God doesn't call in the calm. He chooses moments of chaos and confusion precisely to awaken you. Make no mistake, you're not hearing this by chance. Something greater wants your attention, but the question is, will you listen? Here, we won't promise you easy answers. Quite the contrary. We'll talk about why God's silence can be the greatest message of your life, how to recognize opportunities disguised as difficulties, and most importantly, how to act before it's too late. It's a warning, but also an invitation. Before we continue, I want to ask you a simple favor. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs a spiritual awakening. Don't keep what could be a redemption to yourself. And I want to propose a practical challenge. Now write the sentence in the comments. I choose to hear God's voice, even in the silence. Write as a public commitment. Whoever declares, decides. And whoever decides, transforms. Now, are you ready to understand the call? Because the answer won't wait until you feel ready. God's call and spiritual sensitivity. God doesn't follow our schedule. In fact, He often chooses precisely the most unexpected moments to call us. Just when we think everything is falling apart, when the ground disappears from under our feet, when silence seems to dominate our soul, that's when God's call comes. And you know what's most surprising? We almost never perceive this call immediately. Therefore, spiritual sensitivity needs to be cultivated like one cultivates a friendship. Day after day, in silence, with attention. The difficulties you face today, whether financial crises, family problems, illness, or feelings of loneliness, may actually be perfect disguises for God's calling. Yes, what you perceive as an obstacle may be God's chosen path to promote your spiritual transformation. Stop seeing your problems as punishments. Start seeing them as invitations. But how do you know if you're being called? Pay attention to that discomfort that won't go away, that feeling that you need to change, even without knowing where to begin. God speaks through this discomfort. Your soul recognizes the Creator's voice, even before you rationally understand what's happening. This is spiritual sensitivity. Want to develop this awareness? Set aside moments of true silence in your day. Not the silence of your surroundings, but the inner silence where you can quiet your own anxious thoughts and simply listen. Read the scriptures as if they were personal letters sent to you. Stop looking for grandiose signs and start appreciating the small touches in your heart. Remember, God doesn't need storms to make Himself heard. Sometimes He whispers. God may be speaking to you right now, using this content as a channel. Don't ignore it. Spiritual sensitivity isn't a gift reserved for the few. It's a skill born of a willingness to listen. Now ask yourself, am I willing to listen, even without understanding? God's silence and spiritual communication. God's silence is one of the most challenging experiences for those seeking spiritual growth. You pray, ask for signs, cry out, and nothing. Just an emptiness that echoes within your chest. But does this silence signify absence? Or is it precisely in this silence that He speaks most? It's curious to think about, but the truth is that God's silence isn't rejection, it's preparation. Imagine a teacher during a test. He's silent, not because he's abandoned the student, but because it's time to apply what has already been taught. Something similar happens with God. When everything goes silent, perhaps it's time to reflect. What does God want me to learn in silence? The pause, which so many neglect, is essential to developing spiritual listening. Amidst the hustle and bustle of everyday life, we create a communication with God based solely on asking, and we forget to listen. His silence, then, becomes an invitation to recalibrate this relationship. Perhaps God is silent because you're not ready to hear what He wants to say. But be careful. Hearing God's voice isn't something mystical, reserved for a select few. It's a process that begins with the decision to stop. Silence your thoughts, control your anxiety, and accept that you don't have all the answers. In practice, start by setting aside 5 minutes of your day just for silence. No prayer lists, no music, no readings, just you and the divine presence. This silence, which may seem uncomfortable at first, will become fertile ground for God to plant answers within you. Don't run from silence, embrace it. God often speaks when we stop trying to control the conversation. God's silence is not an end, it's a bridge. But only those who choose to trust, even without understanding, can cross it. The calling doesn't require perfection, just availability. There's a huge misconception that paralyzes many people, thinking they can only answer God's call when they're spiritually prepared. You know that idea of, "I'll start when I'm more holy," or "when my life is in order." Forget it. God never calls the ready, He calls the willing. Perfection was never a prerequisite. Availability was. God isn't looking for people without flaws, but hearts humble enough to say, "Here I am." What He desires is an open heart, not a list of impeccable accomplishments. Indeed, it is precisely on the journey that He shapes character, adjusts the route, and transforms the soul. If you wait until you feel perfect before taking action, you'll spend your life waiting. Acting in the present is essential to not miss the divine opportunities that surround you. Have you ever thought about how many doors you've left closed simply because you felt incapable? Spiritual opportunity doesn't knock on the door of those who feel ready, but of those who are willing to open it. And believe me, often, the first action God expects of you is precisely a hesitant, fragile, but true step. Small acts, like sharing a message of faith, beginning to pray silently, or dedicating a few minutes to reading the Bible. Don't underestimate small beginnings. They are the soil where great spiritual transformations germinate. Want to know how to get started? Instead of planning grandiose actions, do something simple today. Read a chapter of the Gospels as if it were a letter written just for you. Speak to God without filters, without formalities. Just talk. And when you feel afraid, remember, fear is not a sign to stop. It's a sign that you're leaving your comfort zone. Availability is faith in motion. And motion is what God desires most from you right now. Listen with the heart. Have you ever tried to hear God using only your ears? If so, you may have been frustrated. God doesn't communicate like we do. His voice resonates in the heart, not in the eardrum. And to listen with the heart requires more than hearing. It requires surrender. Many treat reading the Bible as a religious obligation or an intellectual exercise, but it was written as a personal letter. Each verse is like a sentence addressed directly to you. Read the scriptures as if reading the words of someone who knows you deeply and desires to transform you. This shift in perspective can open doors you never imagined. Try opening the Gospels and reading slowly, stopping whenever something touches your soul. It's not about page count, but about depth of understanding. Intimacy with God arises from this kind of attentive listening and inner silence. It's not by shouting prayers or multiplying requests that you will perceive divine guidance. It's by silencing your ego, taming anxiety, and emptying yourself of the need to control everything. And why listen with your heart? Because the mind judges, analyzes, and distrusts. The heart, when open, simply welcomes. Sometimes God's guidance doesn't make logical sense, but even so, something inside you feels peace. It's your heart recognizing the Creator's signature. Practically, how do you do this? Choose a fixed time of day. Open a gospel like John or Matthew. Before reading, pray, saying, "God, speak to me through your word." Then read slowly as if waiting for an answer. And when you feel something stirring within you, stop. Meditate. This is listening with your heart. Remember, God doesn't compete with the noise in your mind. He speaks where there's room to be heard. Are you willing to be silent to listen? Courage to declare faith. Many people imagine that bearing witness to their faith means preaching to crowds or being recognized as a spiritual leader. Nothing could be further from the truth. True testimony, the kind that moves God's heart, happens in small acts. And do you know what requires the most courage? Declaring your faith in life's simple situations. In a conversation with friends, in a gesture at work, or even by posting something uplifting on social media. Declaring your faith doesn't mean being perfect. It means fearlessly showing that you walk with God even amid your flaws. Don't hide your imperfections behind silence. When you embrace your journey, even if it's imperfect, you inspire others to do the same. Someone needs to see your faith in action to believe it's possible to live this way. Want a simple example? Instead of just liking that Christian message on social media, share it. Leave a public comment declaring your faith. Or even more practical, in your next family conversation, mention that you've been seeking spiritual growth. This is spiritual courage, being a light where it would be easier to hide. But be careful, don't make a show of it. Declaring your faith is an act of truth, not appearance. When your heart connects with God, testimony flows naturally. It's like a candle lit in the darkness. It doesn't need to announce its light. It just shines. Remember, small public gestures have great value in the spiritual world. Perhaps your simple "God bless you" or an invitation for someone to hear a message of faith could become the beginning of a life-changing experience. The question is, are you ready to make your faith visible? Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's deciding to act despite it. Transformation, outside the comfort zone. God doesn't work to keep you comfortable. He works to transform you. And transformation almost always happens outside your comfort zone. After all, how can you grow if you insist on staying where you feel safe? Perhaps this discomfort you've been feeling lately isn't the enemy, but God's nudge calling you to something greater. Many people make the mistake of thinking that spiritual transformation happens in calm moments when everything is fine. But God, more often than not, acts in chaos. In those moments when life seems too messy to continue, it's there, right where you think about giving up, that He begins to work. And don't think that transformation is comfortable. It will hurt. It will require sacrifice. It will change your priorities. But every discomfort will be a sign that something is being rebuilt within you. The courage to face this change is what separates those who merely desire transformation from those who truly experience it. How can you step out of your comfort zone? Start by changing your small routines. If you always pray the same way, change. Try new prayer times. If you never fast, start small. If you avoid talking about your faith, dare to share your faith. God doesn't need grandiose actions. He needs you to be in motion. And remember, all renewal requires surrender. Trust God even when you don't understand the process. Surrendering to the unknown is, in fact, a declaration of trust in God. And it is this trust that will allow Him to work within you. So ask yourself, what's keeping me stuck in the same place? Because God has already called you. Now it's up to you to take the first step, even if it's shaky. Silence as a space for growth. When God is silent, most people interpret it as rejection. But in truth, God's silence is an intentional space created by Him to foster your spiritual growth. It's not absence, it's preparation. Think of a farmer. The earth seems silent before harvest, but beneath it, the seeds are germinating. This is how it works with the soul. Silence doesn't mean God has abandoned you, quite the opposite. It means He trusts you enough to allow you to grow in this space of waiting. But this growth only happens if you change your perspective. Instead of asking, "Why doesn't God speak?" ask, "What does He want me to learn from this silence?" This time, often uncomfortable, is the necessary interval for your soul to mature. It's when you learn to trust without seeing, to remain even without feeling. During this time, God works not around you but within you. How can you make practical use of this time of silence? Create intentional habits of reflection. Keep a spiritual journal. Record your prayers, your doubts, your small victories. Read Proverbs and Ecclesiastes for practical wisdom on your journey. And most importantly, stop demanding immediate answers. Spiritual growth is like the sunrise. It doesn't happen all at once, but gradually illuminating what was previously dark. Embrace silence as a divine tool, not a punishment. This time of pause is the gift you didn't know you needed. And when God speaks clearly again, you'll be more prepared to listen. Remember, silence is not the absence of movement. It's preparation for the next step. And perhaps right now, God is inviting you to grow in silence, opening to new opportunities. There's something few understand. Spiritual time is worth more than any wealth. The opportunities God places before you are not simple invitations. They are spiritual portals that once closed may never open in the same way again. The problem is that we are often so busy with our routines and worries that we don't even notice when God calls us to something new. Ignoring God's call is like closing the door on transformation. And make no mistake, God is patient, but not indefinitely. His timing is perfect, but not unlimited. How many spiritual opportunities have you missed waiting for the right moment? Opening yourself to new opportunities requires courage, but above all, it requires sensitivity. God speaks through simple situations, an unexpected conversation, an invitation to serve, a need that arises near you. Don't wait for the thunderous supernatural. The call often comes disguised as normality. Want some practical advice? Every day, when you wake up, pray objectively. Lord, open my eyes so I don't miss the opportunities that come today. It's that simple. When you activate this awareness, you begin to see what previously went unnoticed. A person in need of help, an opportunity to serve, a moment to share your faith. And what's more, the fear of making a mistake cannot be greater than the desire to obey. Don't hide behind the excuse of, "It's not time yet." If God has placed the impulse in your heart, the time is now. Lost spiritual time cannot be recovered. But today, you have a new opportunity to open yourself up, to make yourself available. Spiritual opportunities are hidden treasures in your daily life. The difference lies in who chooses to see them. And are you going to let this next door close? Decision as the key to transformation. Perhaps people's greatest spiritual error isn't a lack of knowledge or opportunities, it's indecision. The spiritual life is made of daily choices, not occasional grand revelations. And every decision you postpone is an opportunity for transformation you unwittingly reject. It's important to understand, God calls but doesn't force. He invites but doesn't push. Spiritual transformation begins when you make the decision to act even without having all the answers. After all, faith isn't the absence of doubt. Faith is choosing to walk even while carrying doubt alongside you. Decision is action in its purest form. When you decide to begin, the heavens move in your favor. Even a small step can unlock spiritual doors that were previously closed. But to do so, you must choose to move beyond theory and into practice. And do you know what this means? That you don't have to wait until you feel the urge to obey. Those who decide, act. Those who feel often remain stagnant. Want some practical advice? Choose a concrete spiritual change today, not tomorrow. Something simple. Waking up 10 minutes earlier to pray, sending an encouraging message to someone, fasting for a meal. A small decision sustained day after day has a greater impact than any fleeting emotion. The secret to transformation isn't found in grand supernatural events. It's found in ordinary decisions made consistently. God honors those who decide to act even in uncertainty, because it is in this choice that He finds space to operate. Now look at your life. What decisions are you putting off out of fear, doubt, or comfort? Remember, time doesn't stop, and your transformation is waiting for one thing: your decision. Action is a test of faith. Faith isn't something you feel. It's something you demonstrate. And do you know how? Through action. It's easy to say you trust God while everything is at a standstill, but the true test of faith appears when you decide to act, even without guarantees. To act is to place your trust in God in a practical, visible, and real way. Many people confuse waiting on God with stagnation, but waiting on the Lord doesn't mean standing still. It means continuing to walk even without seeing the full path. It's like crossing a bridge in the fog. You only see the next step, but you need to trust that the structure is there. True faith requires action, and that action starts small. A yes to an invitation, a prayer you've never said before, a change in habit. God doesn't expect you to change everything at once, but He does expect you to do something. A first step, even a timid one, is worth more in the spiritual world than 1,000 intentions never realized. Want a simple practice? Choose something you feel God is asking, something you've been putting off, and take the first step, even if it's small. Put into action what you know, even without seeing the next chapter. Faith that remains in thought is just theory. When you act, it becomes testimony. What's more, your actions can become the answer to someone's prayer. Perhaps your step of faith will be the miracle someone else is waiting for. So remember, even a small gesture, like sharing this message with someone, can be an act of faith. Don't underestimate small beginnings. They are the beginning of greater transformations. Now ask yourself, what can you do today to turn your faith into concrete action? Movement is essential. If there's one spiritual truth often ignored, it's this: God works while you move. Expecting answers from a stagnant heaven is like asking to reap without sowing. Taking action isn't optional. It's essential, not because God needs your work, but because movement is the environment where transformation happens. Many people spend years dreaming of spiritual change, but never get anywhere. Why? Because they confuse desire with action. Desiring is passive. Acting is deciding to walk daily. And here's the bottom line: God doesn't expect perfection in your movement. He expects availability. Even if you take a wrong turn, the fact that you're moving allows God to redirect you. In practice, don't wait until it feels like the right time to start something. Start and let the moment become right along the way. Read, pray, serve, share your faith. It doesn't have to be grand. Just keep moving. Movement differentiates those who simply want to change from those who are truly willing to be transformed. Consider the example of a boat. While it's stationary, it's impossible to change its direction. But when it's moving, even a slight adjustment to the rudder can take it to a completely different destination. Your spiritual life works the same way. So ask yourself today, am I moving or just wishing? Remember, wanting without acting is like praying without believing. God isn't looking for people who know the whole path. He's looking for those who say, "Here I am, ready to walk," even if the steps are uncertain. After all, on the spiritual journey, those who move, grow, overcoming limitations. With God's help, how many times have you thought you weren't capable, that your limitations were too great to keep you going? This thought is more common than it seems, but the truth is, your weaknesses are not an obstacle to God. In fact, they are the stage where He displays His power. God doesn't choose the capable, He empowers the chosen. And do you know when He acts most powerfully? Precisely when you recognize that you can't do it alone. It's at that moment, when you feel small, weak, or insufficient, that divine power begins to act in extraordinary ways. Perhaps you look at yourself and only see limitations, shyness, fear, trauma, lack of resources. But God sees opportunities. What you perceive as an end point, He sees as a starting point. This isn't empty motivational speech. It's a profound spiritual principle. Your human limitations are free space for God to work. In practice, how can you overcome these barriers? First, acknowledge your weaknesses without shame. Pray honestly, Lord, I can't do it alone. Then, take small steps, trusting that strength will come along the way. God's help doesn't usually come before the decision, but after the action. Think of Moses, who felt incapable of speaking in public, or Gideon, who felt like the least of his family. They all had one thing in common. They transcended their limitations with God's strength. And you can too. Perhaps the impossible you fear is just the space where God wants to act. But He needs your permission, your decision, and your movement. The limitation you so lament may be precisely the place where God will show you the impossible. Strength of faith and transformation. Faith is the fuel for spiritual transformation, but be careful. Not just any faith, not the vague emotional faith that depends on feelings, but a firm, concrete faith built on trust in God even when everything seems contrary. This is the faith that generates movement and real transformation. And here's the truth. God doesn't need someone extraordinary to do extraordinary things. He just needs a willing heart. True faith isn't born when you understand everything. It's born when you decide to trust, even without understanding. That's when your limitations become opportunities for God to act. You know that area of your life where you always stumble, that weakness that seems impossible to overcome. That's precisely where faith can bring about transformation, not because you can do it alone, but because by trusting in God, you free up space for the impossible to happen. In practice, how can we apply this power of faith? Simple. Start declaring, even before you see it. Tell yourself, I believe God is working even when I can't see it. Write it down. Pray about it. Keep your focus on what God can do, not on what you can't. The secret to transformation isn't becoming stronger, but allowing God to strengthen you. And this happens when you surrender your weakness and step out in faith. Every time you choose to trust God instead of fear, you are planting seeds of spiritual transformation. Every prayer said in silence, every decision to keep going even when weary, all of this is practical faith, and practical faith moves heaven. Perhaps what you call a limitation, God calls a starting point, transforming pain into something beautiful. It's hard to believe that pain can be God's tool. After all, how could something so heavy, so difficult, generate something beautiful? But this is one of the Creator's greatest specialties, rebuilding lives from what seemed irreparable. Perhaps you carry scars on your soul, marks of loss, disappointment, failure. But know this, God doesn't waste pain. Everything that has hurt you can, in His hands, become an instrument of transformation, both for your life and for the lives of others. Remember, the tallest trees grow on the most disturbed soil. Your pain is not the end of the story. It is the soil where God desires to plant something new. And when this transformation begins, pain ceases to be just suffering and becomes testimony. In practice, how can you transform your pain into something beautiful? First, stop hiding your scars. Present them to God in sincere prayer. Then, be willing to help others facing similar pain. When you allow your story to reach someone, God uses your falls to lift others up. You may not realize it, but your simple, "I've been through this too, and God sustained me," could be the ray of hope someone needs. Don't underestimate the power of a true story told with sincerity. And what's more, don't rush the process. God transforms pain into something beautiful in due time. In the meantime, remain faithful. Every tear shed in silence is watered by Him. Your pain in the right hands can become poetry, and this poetry written by God will be read by people you never imagined. Now reflect. Are you willing to surrender your wounds so that He can transform them into healing? Reflection and action. Reflecting without acting is like planning a trip and never leaving home. In the spiritual life, it's not enough to think, meditate, or understand. You need to transform reflection into action, and this doesn't mean waiting until you feel ready. It means choosing to act even while harboring doubts and insecurities. After all, true transformation happens when reflection meets practice. Many recognize God's action in their lives, but stagnate in contemplation. They feel God's call, perceive spiritual opportunities, and do nothing. Why? Because action requires commitment, and commitment sometimes is frightening. If you feel God is calling you to something, don't complicate things. Start with the basics. If you feel the need to reconcile with someone, send that message. If you realize you need to seek greater spiritual intimacy, dedicate daily time to reading the Bible. Small actions are seeds that grow over time. Don't wait to plant trees. Start with seeds. An important secret: spiritual transformation doesn't require radical changes all at once. It requires real, consistent, and conscious decisions. Every small action, when taken with sincerity, attracts God's action in your life. Want a practical tip? Grab a pen and paper and write today. What has God asked of me that I haven't yet put into practice? List at least 3 points. Then, choose one to start acting on now. Simple, straightforward, and straightforward. Reflection without action is stagnation. But when you decide to move, even slowly, each step becomes a declaration of faith, and God honors those who decide to act. The question remains, what concrete action will you take today in response to God's call? And now, after everything we've discussed, there's only one question left. What will you do with what you just heard? Because knowing isn't enough. Reflecting without action doesn't transform anyone. The decision is in your hands. Do you feel God calling you? Then don't ignore it. Perhaps the discomfort you feel today is God Himself saying, "Son, get up. It's time to walk." And remember, He doesn't demand perfection. He asks for availability. The first step may seem small, but in the spiritual world it's huge. What decisions are you putting off out of fear? What divine opportunities are you unwittingly ignoring? What if the silence you call abandonment is actually a strategic pause for your growth? Now, I want to invite you to something deeper. Write in the comments what God spoke to you through this message. Don't let this reflection die within you. Share it. Give a name to your next step of faith. If this message touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Here, each content is prepared to help you grow spiritually, even when the path seems difficult. And remember, action is the proof of true faith. What you do from now on will show the depth of your trust in God. I believe your transformation starts today. What about you?